Hey everybody, welcome back to Old World Legends, where we focus on growing the community. I'm your host Mike, and with me as always is Evan.
More than ever, Dragon Ogre Shaggoth Evan today. Because we're talking
Oh,
about the Beastmen again.
yes. Oh my
Yeah.
goodness. Why are we talking about Beastmen? Because Beastmen are awesome.
Yeah.
So I think the big thing is we're going to do a quick little video series here where we're going to try and cover all the different factions one video at a time, talking about the 1.5 updates. Now that we're 6, 7 or so weeks in, I forget exactly how many weeks it is, but since we run a few events, we now have a lot of games under our belt. We've seen a ton of games with the community play out, and so now we feel we are prepared to talk about what are the major impacts to each faction, at least the ones that we're really seeing play out as contributors on the tabletop. And then we had to decide where to start with, and of course, Evan loves Beastmen, so he said, why don't we start there?
Yeah, absolutely. So here we have a couple of bullet points just to help us remind us to talk about some specific things I was thinking about. And when we're talking about the Beastmen. So a lot of things changed and a lot of things stayed the same. The Beastmen were an army that was doing well despite the fact that it relied very much on infantry, didn't have flying mounted characters, and didn't have large amounts of poison shooting, really. I mean, I think people doing the Ungor block thing wasn't exactly working great. So all of the normal stuff that they're doing was doing pretty good. With one maybe noticeable exception was that Viletide was still very, very good before. But the 1.51 changes have made, and the match play guide have changed a lot of things. First of all, your big threats of enemy characters are locked at the 500 point cap for the most part. Whereas that is basically a non-issue for the Beastmen characters, and we'll talk about that in a bit. So the guys you're fighting tend to have fewer magic weapons or fewer defensive items and stuff like that than they did before. And then there's a whole new Arcane Journal that just barely dropped right before the update, and there's a lot of different ways to use it. Yeah. So.
Yes.
Okay, so let's talk about some of the things that are definitely different. And again, some of this is just because of the Arcane Journal, which was only around for what, like 2-3 weeks before the match play guide or something like that?
Yeah, honestly, it was around for so little. There was very few games that got in before the 1.15 drop happened. So we're
Ooh.
really kind of seeing both at the same time. So we're not going to exclude the Arcane Journal. We're just going to kind of include it all at the same time. So it's really around this time period, Beastman before versus Beastman now. It definitely feels like they definitely got a meaningful lift in many different ways and a lot of new exciting build options, which is fantastic. So let's kind of go through the list, Evan. And what are the things that really stood out to you for the big changes?
Okay, so first off, I think that the potentially elephant in the room is that Wild Herd is just amazing. That's one of the Arcane Journal Armies of Infamy. It doesn't have that many restrictions, so Wild Herd, it doesn't let you have Minotaur characters, and then now Minotaurs as your core and special units, and it doesn't let you have the Gorgon, which is a Minotaur giant. I don't know if everyone knows that, but the Gorgon is like in the lore an actual special Minotaur giant. But what you get in return is pretty amazing, and the main special rule is that you can use the Dark Coven rule once per turn per wizard now. The FAQ just totally rewrote how this thing works, and once per turn per wizard, you can either on a casting or dispel roll add another +1 if you have another wizard nearby. And the only downside is that if you miscast, the miscast happens to both of those, or if there's multiple 3 wizards, for example, all getting that same result. So you can, this more recently happened to me, roll the 6 on the miscast table and get a strength 6 small blast template on top of your level 1 wizard when he failed and rolled miscast, and then also on top of level 4 who's nearby. But that only happens when you're activating the Dark Coven, so if you are particularly worried about it, you can just not activate it for the extra +1. But just the fact that you get this extra +1 once per turn per wizard makes the idea of taking lots of level 1s very, very interesting as well. Yeah. And
Yeah,
then
it's
you
very
combine
viable.
that,
It is
yeah.
exciting.
Once you combine this with the fact that every single Beastman player, and we saw this at Palm Springs Open, is going to be drinking a Herdstone, because the Herdstone is just stupidly useful. It's incredible.
It's really good.
It's better than the forest that Wood Elves get to bring, and you know how many rules that the Wood Elves have for I'm near a forest, so therefore X happens. I mean, that's how good a Herdstone is. And one of the main ways it's very good is you have a big bubble of +1 to cast. Almost never coming up is the fact that also if enemies are nearby when you control it, they have -1 to cast. I never forget, I never remember that one. But the thing that does also come up a lot is that your units have reroll 1s to wound when they're within range of it as well. And so I really find that once you have Primal Fury going off with a pretty good leadership, and you reroll 1s to hit, and then you have reroll 1s to wound as well, especially with this particular Beast Lord character that I loved building recently,
Yep.
God damn it, you just slam things in combat. Like, if I ever get into combat, I'm like, I don't even care what you are. I'm happy about this. This is great because your units just trade amazingly well, and you're very consistent about it because of the rerolls.
Yeah, it is interesting. I think one of the pros and cons is I think right now with the Arcane Journal is that, as you said, a Wild Herd is just so much better. That I'm not disappointed that it's a good list. We want to see good lists. I am a little bit disappointed that it's so much better than the other lists. I wish the other lists were more compelling or interesting. But this is, as we saw again at the RTTs and at the PSO, right? It's almost an auto take for Beastman players. It's so good. And
Well,
it's not that I want it to be not as
yeah.
good. I just wish the other lists were a little bit better.
So you've got a couple downsides. The first downside is you can't have a Doom Bull, which is practically ubiquitous to every single Grand Army Beastman list. They've got a Doom Bull. He's rocking a
True.
powerful weapon, a lot of armor, and he gets to have 5 wounds with I believe it's 5 attacks base, and if he gets frenzied, he
Hmm.
gets 2 more. So this
Hmm.
a Doom Bull is very very strong, and for a character who's technically infantry, he can just hit like an absolute freight train. So that's
Oh
amazing,
yeah.
and you can't have that. Okay. And then the other
Yep.
thing you can't have is the Gorgons, who people also very much enjoy for their monster slaying potential, even though that pretty much is just not going to happen if the enemy is a very good player, because they're not flying monsters and they have frenzy, so they are very easy
Yeah.
to deal with in those 2 dimensions. Or you also don't get to have Gigantic Chaos Spawn. Those are only available to Grand Army Beastmen. So those are
Yep.
3 things that almost every Grand Army Beastman player was using in almost every single list at tournaments until recently, and you have to give up all of that. But I believe the trade-off is worth it, and that's interesting to see.
Yeah. And I don't. And Evan certainly wasn't the other one. As we saw a lot of other players doing the same thing as well, and we're also seeing that online with other communities as well. So, yeah, I think the biggest thing is will we see this change in the upcoming months? But I think one of the biggest things, and we don't know yet whether was this an oversight by Games Workshop or was it not, the fact that you can stack these multiple plus 2 casts with this in particular loadout with the Beastmen, where you can get +1 +2. Is there a way to get +3, Evan, as
Yes.
well? Right. Right, while they seem to have addressed in the 1.5 update FAQ, took it away from pretty much every other army, whether it was stacking Mortis Engine, stacking the Casket of Souls, stacking other things, even the Mortuary Cult, they made sure to address that in different ways. But it seems like the Beastmen dodged that bullet, and I think part of the reason they potentially dodged that bullet is because the Arcane Journal came out literally like just a week or two before it. So I think the question is, because you can stack it, it's so powerful, will we see, oops, that was a mistake? And in the upcoming months they will
So
the next FAQ will take it away, or this was totally intentional
yeah.
and this is meant to be the theme and the flavor of the list.
So just to be clear, you can't stack. So it used to be that Dark Coven, when the book that I have that I bought says I add +1 for every wizard within 12 inches when I do this. And so if I have 5 wizards, I can get +5. And even if I was a level 1, I'd be casting at a +6, or a level 4 would be casting with +9. That was how it worked
Hmm.
before. However, you would miscast on any roll of a double. So the,
Yep.
the the big difference now is they lowered the miscast chance, but they also lowered the potential bonus. And the only problem is you can still stack this with all your other bonuses to cast, like for example the Herdstone or the Jagged
Yeah.
Dagger, which is a very viable option,
There
especially
you
for a
go.
level 1. So I just kill
Yeah.
one guy and I get another +1 to cast. So I've got my Dark Coven, Jagged Dagger, level 1, Herdstone for +4, and that's a pretty hard people to deal with.
Seems Yeah, especially in the new meta where 1.5, where so many wizards only have +1 to dispel or +2 to dispel the vast majority of the armies out there. So we don't yet know whether this was intentional. I personally believe this was an oversight or a mistake by GW, and I think it's something they're going to correct in the future. And then the question will be, if they do address that and change it in the future, will this stop being such an auto take for all Beastman player, or will we start seeing more of the Grand Army back on the table or not, or everybody just loves Wild Herd so much this is just going to be the dominant list for quite some time? That's
Yeah.
very possible.
Well, let's continue talking about other things that either fit into Wild Herd. Dark Herd. That's a fun name for the list.
That's a new
Dark
Arcane
Herd.
Journal. Well,
Yeah.
yeah, let's move on. So Chariot Spam, tell us about that, Evan.
So when you've got this potential, especially a vibe amongst people, that there's going to be more infantry getting used on the table now.
Oh yeah.
I believe that chariots are just an amazing answer to that. It's even the Beastman ones, especially because they can be a very cheap core unit. 85 points as a light chariot, or it's a heavy chariot for the Tuskgor chariot is amazing for what you get, which is kind of like a unit of fast cavalry that's more consistent with its damage output. It's very similar to if I brought, let's say, like 4 Empire Knights and they were going to go run around just deciding to charge like a cannon or charge the flank or something. but I kind of just like it more. It's got toughness 4, pretty decent save, and if you kind of contribute any shooting to it, it's like, sure, fine, you can blow it up, but it was pretty cheap to begin with. And if I send that
Yep.
in addition to a regular unit into your infantry block, it usually swings the combat my way. So I like the idea of bringing the Tuskgor chariots as support pieces. And also, they can actually flee from a charge and have a halfway decent chance of rallying using the general's leadership. A
Hmm.
lot of people maybe don't know this. Razorgore are war beasts. They cannot use the general's leadership. They cannot use the BSB's reroll on their rally test.
Bummer.
And they are also unit strength 1. So if a Razorgore charges a unit of like
Hmm.
5 archers and just fails to hurt them, it could lose combat and break and flee because it's double outnumbered because it's unit strength 1. So
Yeah, and definitely 1.5. That's a huge factor. I mean, before 1.5, combat resolution was not nearly such a factor. It is a major factor now in 1.5. I think it's a huge benefit to the game. And so all of a sudden, those rules that weren't so relevant before, now they're very relevant. And you said the chariots are core, right? So most armies do not have chariots in a core slot. So that is pretty awesome that they can take chariots in core. I think we're going to see a lot more of them. And I think you're exactly right, Evan. I think seeing 2 or 3 of them is a threat unto itself, but just seeing them, supporting almost like a detachment, if you will, to the infantry block, hovering by them, get ready to countercharge or charge. Or again, if you have to charge the enemy, another infantry block, right? You don't get that second rank to attack on the charging turn. Having that chariot boosting your output potential is a pretty big deal.
and they have first charge. So if you're charging into, for example,
Nice.
let's just say it's a big block of night goblins, and they have like 7, characters in it, right? And
Hmm.
if you charge in that with your Slugsglin block, which is going to be pretty hard for even the night goblin characters to hurt, you could just win combat, and they'll have no rank bonus and be leadership 6 on their break test. And just like, okay, well, the entire enemy main frontline unit just ran off the table because my chariot was there. So
Yeah,
first charge
first
is
charge never
super
mattered
important.
as much as it does in 1.5 now. It's a
Yeah,
huge factor versus other infantry blocks now that we're seeing them all over the place, and in particular those with Horde and Warband. Pretty massive factor to hit them with something like that.
definitely, definitely. I mean, I'm not necessarily saying you're going to take 10 chariots. I just think that if you could
No.
bring, and characters on them, for example, can be quite interesting. Whether it's the wizards who can just cast spells in any direction and then still have a pretty decent firing platform, or for example, just the beast lord on one can be a great unit.
Hmm.
Yeah, so I think they're very interesting. Then we have the next thing up is with the parry changes, is it worth it to potentially bring hand weapon and shield gore? Especially because if you get charged, you fight in the 2 ranks. So the difference between
Hmm.
additional hand weapon and shield is instead of it being I have twice as many attacks, I only have 50% more with hand weapon shield.
Hmm.
I've done some playtesting with this. I find that a lot of the times the things that are going to charge and really actually threaten your infantry blocks probably have AP2 anyway, so you don't get your parry save at all. And the troops that really benefit from the parry save are the ones that have like light armor and shield, so they can get at least
Hmm.
up to a 4 plus, right? So I'm not convinced yet. I did just realize yesterday that the Primal Herd, which is the required unit in the Wild Herd build, actually has Motley Crew. So the Gore that are in it could take additional hand weapons in the front rank and have shield
Hmm.
guys behind them, and they could still end up with the parry save, even though they have some frontline guys with additional hand weapons, which is interesting. And Motley Crew continues to be a rule that's incredibly annoying for you and your opponent to even figure out what the hell's going on.
Yep, that's definitely something in the future. So I think we haven't yet figured out whether or not this is the right combo, but it is just something to keep testing with it. I know
Mhm.
it has been different for me, certainly with the like goblins and night goblins and such, but we'll cover that when we talk about orcs and goblins. So Minotaurs even worse. Are they actually worse, Evan, or did everything else just get better?
It's actually both. So the FAQ change to how the Bounty Crew rule works meant that you could not just stack up your champion to have a 2 plus armor save, and then the other 2 guys
Hmm.
next to him miraculously somehow also have a 2 plus armor save, which was
Yep.
really dumb. And if you did that, like, I'm sure your opponent made a really funny look on their face when they were talking about it, because it's like that makes no sense at all. So they nerfed that into the ground, and then they gave all the other infantry in the game the ability to parry with a shield, but Minotaurs can't, even though their best loadout is normally to take the hand weapon and shield. So if they could have their light armor, hand weapon, and shield for a 4-up armor save, that would actually be a pretty interesting frontline block, especially because Gore and hand weapon shield and stuff, they don't even have the light armor, so the Minotaurs would actually get a better save. But now they don't parry, and they don't fight in the 2 ranks,
Hmm.
and they're just comparatively worse. And so Minotaurs
Yeah.
normally would only really get to make a charge against something like, let's just say Longbeards or Hammerers or something
Yep.
slow and has lower charge rates than them. And do you really want to charge in with these guys, even with their impact hit? Do you want to get 2 attacks back, 2 ranks of attacks back hitting into you on your only 5 up armor save?
Yeah,
I don't
pretty
know.
brutal. And I think, right, as Evan was explaining, the Motley Crew wasn't specifically targeting Minotaurs or the armor save problem with that. That targets everything with it. But the Minotaurs, certainly in the meta, were the most frequently users to abuse that rule. And again, reading it raw, it was not clear. It was super confusing. So that being said, I know at our events we weren't letting them do it. In our FAQ, GW has addressed at least that portion of it now. Motley Crew still is very confusing, quite frankly. And there's an opportunity to clean that up in the future. So they definitely hit that. But again, but in general, Minotaurs didn't get targeted per se, but it certainly kind of felt like it if you're a Beastman player. And large monsters infantry in general just they didn't feel great before 1.5, and they definitely feel worse, and certainly post 1.5 compared to all the buffs that the infantry get. Really disappointed. Really hoping this is something that GW can address in the future. We want to see trolls on the table and Minotaurs and ogres, and we're just not seeing them because they just aren't getting the love and support that they need. Right, the cavalry and flyers, they move so fast. They have their purpose in the game, and they get to choose where to engage. The infantry now have tons of durability and staying power, and a lot more damage output. It's very exciting to see them on the table. But monsters infantry, we're not seeing a reason to take them at the moment, and we would love to see Minotaurs on the table. Everybody would. It would, from you as the Beastman player and your opponents. It's so iconic, and the models are so cool. So I'm really hoping this is something that they address in the future, not specifically just Minotaurs, but all monstrous infantry, so they get put back.
Yeah, and they have the problem we talked about in the match play guide where they're unit strength 3 each, which means if you have a unit of 3, even as a core unit, because you have a Doom Bull or something, they can't hold the objective.
Right. Yeah.
And if I
Really
take 4 of
frustrating.
them and you shoot one of them to death, they can't hold the objective anymore. The unit strength 10 thing
Mhm.
is very biased against certain units that have a hard time maintaining the unit strength 10 boundary.
Well, it feels like it was balanced for infantry and cavalry
Yeah,
and large and monsters and behemoths, and then monsters infantry were just forgotten in that conversation. That's what it
for
feels
sure,
like.
for sure. Yeah, and I don't necessarily think that barely nothing in the entire game would have a single problem with it if that rule for all of the extra infantry rules, the press of battle, the parry, and those kind of rules. If they just said it applies to infantry in general and it worked on monsters infantry, I don't think
Monsters
that
infantry, they'd
would
probably be fine.
anyone say, oh, that's a problem? Minotaur are like 52 points each. They're a lot.
Right, they're so expensive. And again, this isn't specific to Miniature. All the monsters infantry feel
Uh-huh.
too expensive, and the only one, or which is that we see all the time, which is technically monsters cavalry, is the dragon ogres. But the rest of the ones we're just not seeing. I'd love to see them more in the future. Hopefully, this gets addressed.
Yeah.
All right, what's the next one? Dragons. So how does this
So
affect Beastmen?
I really think that the changes to not only the points value on the dragons, but the fact that they can never get to a 2+ armor save means that
Mm-hmm.
you can actually try to fight them in combat. I believe that the Beastman plan before was, oh, I see a dragon on the other side of the table. My only answer is to vile tide it to death before it murders my entire army because nothing can
Mm-hmm.
stand up to it. If I send a Doom Bull with, let's just say it's a Doom Bull with an Ogre Blade, well, guess what? Then he doesn't have that much on the defensive side, even with when it used to cost 65 points. So the Doom Bull
Mm-hmm.
can go in there, do maybe 3 wounds of damage, and then get killed, and it'll be dead.
Yep.
That's it. The Doom Bull
Yep.
died.
Yep.
Even if you do the -2 to hit Doom Bull, then the Doom Bull doesn't have any kind of weapon that's multi-wounds, so the Doom Bull's just -2 to hit when you're trying to swing at him, but then you do 7 stomps because the other opponent rolled a 6, and they wound you on 2s, and you had no armor
Yeah.
really. So then that kills
Yeah.
you.
Mm-hmm.
However, because they're 3+ armor save now, and because Wild Herd gives you the ability to get up to 125 points of items, I think that you can actually
Mm-hmm.
try to fight dragons in combat now. They are less likely to have like a million defensive items and still have something like the Ogre Blade, for example. So
Mm-hmm.
you can just go in there and fight them. The High Elf Dragon tends to have the defense, but doesn't have an Ogre Blade or a Killing Blow sword or anything
Right.
like that. So
Right.
yeah, I think that you can actually plan on trying to deal with them in combat. And in the PSO, you can see from my recent battle reports that my Beast Lord with the Black Maul was able to just duke it out with those dudes. And a lot of times, one or both of us ended up with 1 wound left, and the other one died. Right.
Yeah.
So
Absolutely. And I think this is just in general, dragons are more fightable, but I think it was more of an impact for Beastmen because they
mhm,
didn't have the speed to catch a dragon, right?
mhm.
They don't have a dragon on their side that can go chase the other dragon down. And so even if you took a monster slaying weapon or whatever, right, from the core book, the dragon would just avoid you. You could never catch it. So they need to be able to stand their ground versus dragons. And I think it's both a combination of the 3+ save, the 3+ save instead of 2+, which is a huge deal, and also the 25% of the character cap. Both make dragons, okay, they're still really good, but I absolutely can go toe to toe with this under the right circumstances, which is really exciting. And again, it makes the dragon have to second guess: should I charge into that? Right? They need to now start double charging it with something else or positioning things. And now it really feels like you're playing a game of old world because it's not just one versus one. The monster eats everything. So for Beastmen, I think I agree with Evan. This was a huge change, not on their offense, or the army was changed, but the 1.5 ripple effects for Beastmen in particular makes them, they have a lot more tools that can deal with the dragon than they could before.
I will just say that I think that the Black Maul is one of the most fun and strong weapons in the game, even at the 80-point price point.
Oh, it's so strong. It's so
adorable.
good.
And so in Grand Army, if you're going to take it, then you're pretty much locked at only 20 more points of items, which isn't even enough to buy the Dark Heart, which I think would be really cool if that item was a little bit cheaper. It'd be kind of nice if Beastman had this
Says the
vibe of,
Beastman player.
well, okay, so the Dark Heart, right, is 25 points, and it lets you heal a wound that you lost previously. If that was just a little
Yeah,
bit
you don't
less,
need that with the Black Maul. You're fine. That Black Maul is so good, sir.
I'm just saying, I think it'd be kind of cool if one army in the game didn't try to rely on getting triple saves on itself to not die, and instead just had the ability to just like, I'm just gonna eat like human flesh, and that's how I don't die, right? That'd be kind of fun.
Mhm,
But that item
mhm.
is just way too expensive for not for what it does. So anyway,
That's fair.
we've got this Black Maul guy, and if you're in Wild Herd, then you're gonna put that on the Beast Lord. Or, and my friend, Greg, he won the tournament, and he put that on his Great Bray Shaman, who is also trying to run
Mhm.
Mantle of Gorok. So that's a spell that can give you D6 attacks. Black Maul gives you D6 attacks. That's an absolute mountain of attacks. Okay.
Yep.
Or if you're doing Grand Army, maybe you can try running this on your Doom Bull, and then you probably have to take the Slug Skin to keep him alive in combat, and then also either take Armor Meteoric Iron to have the 5-up armor save that you always get to have,
Mhm.
or
Yep.
even just a Charm Shield or something like that. So there is other options to try to keep the guy alive.
Yep.
A third option is you could take Battle Magic and just hope the 1 in 3 chance you roll Oaken Shield and try to give yourself the ward save that way. So those are
Yep.
all
That's an option.
options
I
on that
think one
side.
other interesting thing I saw with the Black Maul several times over our GT weekend was not just in terms of its damage output, but it was very rare for people to get a max overkill at this point with all the new changes of the
Yes.
character of the mountain not being able to get all the attacks. But I did see multiple times a powerful Beast Lord or character with the Black Maul was one of the few things that could still score a max overkill. So I thought that was really interesting. Didn't think about that before, but after seeing it in the event, saw it multiple times. So that's a rare thing now to achieve that, and Beastman absolutely can pull that off with the Black Maul.
Yes. Okay. Yeah, it's. I recently had a friendly game with a friend where my Black Maul Chariot Lord charged into the flank of his Storm Vermin, who had a 3+ armor save from their parry because they'd heavy armor shield, they were parrying, they
Hmm.
had a 3+ armor save,
It's pretty good.
and with his Razor Gore impact hits and his he rolled a 6 on the number of attacks. He killed 11 of them by himself,
Oh, oh, ow, 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 ow.
and he charged the
All
flank.
right,
He disrupted them. It was amazing. Okay, so
I'm
then
sure the Skaven did not think so. So the Black Maul, pretty awesome. I encourage you, if you haven't been trying it yet, check it out.
yeah.
It's great to see something besides an Ogre Blade, dang it. So I'm very happy to see something on the field of battle that's not an Ogre Blade. Vile Tide, this was really popular before. So what's changed now?
Well, so for one thing, no magic missiles in the game actually had their casting value lowered. I've said this recently.
Okay.
But Viletide was already an 8+, which is one of the
Yeah,
lowest in the game
it is.
for a magic missile. And it is very short range, a 15-inch range, but that is something you can overcome with a couple of things I'm going to talk about. I really think that you don't necessarily need to take a ton of this. I only had 2 casters in my Wild Herd army, and I did pretty good. Um,
Hmm.
but in particular, taking the level 1 with Hag Tree Fetish and Viletide just as the singular dude whose sole job it is to go and threaten to zap things to death that get too close to you, I think is
Yep.
very, very useful. Or what some people are considering doing is having a flying circus where you have a unit of like Ungor archers or Gore that are in skirmish, and you join like 4 wizards to this. They all are like level 1 with Viletide, and you just use Steed of Shadows and the reserve move item that lets you have a reserve move spell that you can cast on them to like fly 12 inches, zap a million things in all directions, and then reserve move back to safety as like a little flying circus. I think it's a people were doing this with gutter runners in Skaven a while ago, and I think this is potentially a wacky thing you can do. In particular, this would be a super useful thing to do if your meta is full of Cathay players who have lanterns, because those lanterns
Hmm.
just blow up your big blocks like crazy. So you have to
They're
fight
very good
fire
at
with
that.
fire, if that makes sense.
Yep, makes a lot of sense. So yeah, I think Vile Tide is still here to stay. Still a great spell. Still something you need to be cautious about. So you definitely want to get those wizards into combat or shamans into combat to try and reduce the number of Vile Tides being slung at you on a given turn. Um, Ambush scoring. So I'm surprised to see this one on the list. Ambushing before, right? It's not the most reliable thing, but if it does perform, it performs better. But we did have been trying the match play guide at our various events. So how do you think that's changed for Beastmen?
So first of all, Beastmen have an absolute mountain of options that are allowed to ambush, which is incredible, including the vast majority of their characters. As long as they're not in a chariot, they can ambush for like 10 points. You can have a
Awesome.
Warhoof. The Warhoof actually is only a 75-point character who has 3 wounds at toughness 4 and 4 attacks. And so that dude is actually like rocking a better stat line than any Empire character that I've seen to start with.
It's a very good stat line.
And before, the problem with the Warhoof guy was, okay, well, but how do I not have him die? Because he can't buy any armor. Well, if you can buy full plate chaos armor on him, then he's perfectly fine. And he's only like 120 points at that point, and for like a 3+ armor save. And then just rocking around like a mountain. And this dude can ambush, and he can go kill things. Or, what I'm referring to here is bringing on units of 5 or 10, gore, ungore, whatever. Just spend a couple extra points to give them the option to ambush, so that if you're playing the mission that has the baggage train or the table quarters control, that you can bring them on to ambush, and just, even if they don't show up until turn 5, that's perfectly fine. You have 1 turn to move into range of the baggage train, and then stand next to it and destroy it, and give yourself 250 victory points for like a 45-point investment in guys. And it's relatively consistent. And if you just bring this unit and say, yeah, those 5 guys, they're in ambush, well, now your opponent has to either try to remember that that's happening and constantly be screening them out, or forget it happens and then lose a lot of victory points to it. So I think that Beastmen have a great option to do this. Okay.
All right, what's next then? Shaggoth. I haven't seen the Shaggoth in a while.
Well,
so why is he making the list
that.
now?
It's actually a reason why he might not make your list. And one of the reasons for that is that for a very brief window of time, when we had the Arcane Journal before 1.51 launched, the Shaggoth could buy the full plate chaos armor item and finally have the 2+ armor save at the same time as the 5+ board save. And he was just a really cool like combat lord, very similar to like a Black Orc war boss on Wyvern kind of thing, where he's not necessarily the dragon level, but he was pretty awesome. And now, since no monster can have a 2+ armor save, the only thing the Shaggoth had going for him is kind of taken away, because he was toughness 5 with only 6 wounds. So he wasn't necessarily the as tough as a dragon. He didn't have a regen. He's not as cheap as a chaos spawn. So he kind of just got shaved out by the fact that they just unilaterally said no monster can have a 2+ armor save, which, by the way, is perfectly fair and fine. It's just that he's kind of expensive for them not being able to do that, if that makes sense.
Yeah, makes total sense. So I think this is one of the negative downsides. Is the Shaggoth is really cool. We'd love to see him on the table. Players were struggling to justify putting him on the table before, but they could find a home for him, and now it feels like he doesn't quite make the cut. So hopefully this is something that GW sees, and it's something that they can address in the future to give him. Again, there's multiple ways they could approach this, but it feels like he just doesn't make the cutting room floor when you only have so many points to spend on your list.
So first of all, I wouldn't hate the idea if he could just be a character, because I would freaking love the idea that my general was a Shaggoth, because he's just adorable as a dude.
I believe there were times in previous editions where he could be, but I don't believe he can in the current edition.
And if he was a character and could just like join Dragon Ogre units, that would also be fun. But just to go with the rules we have now, you can still take heavy chaos armor for the 5 award, and he still has some points left over for something else. I like and he has ensorcelled hand weapons, so you can just leave it at that with that, and then the great weapon for a strength 8 attacks if you need to be able to switch back and forth between the two. There's also just the fact that this guy, he's got the ward save versus magic missiles already, and then he has a spell. He has the level 1 spell that does damage to people around him and makes Dragon Ogres go and to have extra attacks and initiative. So,
which is super cool.
Yeah, and whenever that spell goes off, I'm super happy. And I ran it all the time when I was doing it against level 4 Dispellers. And now, when they're only having a +2 to Dispel versus my level 1 spell, I'm feeling like pretty great about that. So, in some ways, that specific aspect about the Shaggoth got way better. So, I mean, I want to put him on the table, but I can't imagine I'm going to do as well as if I wasn't taking him. That makes sense.
Yep. So we'll see what the future has. All right, we have one more bullet point for huge changes or impacts we see with the Beastmen in 1.5. Primal Magic. So what about it, Evan?
So Primal Magic is a really weird lore of magic, because it's very similar to like the Necromancy, where there's a lot of like leadership debuffs. However, there are some spells in there, and because there's 2 vortexes in there, that can basically either lower leadership or just lower ballista skill based shooting rolls to hit or block line of sight with the
Right.
is it Neath the Shade and Woadspan? Essentially, I think that Primal Magic can be a great tech piece, especially when we're in the Cathay meta, because if you can just throw out a Vortex now, as long as you just get the Vortex off once, either with a Power Scroll, for example, then it'll probably just sit there the entire game. And if you just throw that out in the right spot at the right time with, for example, Mike, you were mentioning scouts. Well, guess what? Beastmen can actually have a scouting wizard.
Really?
Yeah.
That's exciting.
Yeah. The big problem with scouting your wizard is you don't have any. The only other thing that scouts is heart beast. So if you throw your wizard out in scout and you chuck him up from the front lines, how do you have him not die before your lines get to him?
Well, you have to hope he's behind a building or something.
So it's an interesting prospect. I certainly like the idea, and one of the main reasons to do it would be to either be able to threaten to do Vile Tides really early, or to throw out these very potentially useful vortexes and just have them be sitting there for a long time without your enemy being able to get rid of them. Could be great. And then the other thing about Primal Magic, which is wacky, is that if you have it and you roll the right spell, because you have to take Hag Tree Fetish to do this, right? You could have Vile Tide and the Magic Missile that does a ton of damage with like D3 hits for every guy under a straight line. And if you can reroll a wound with that spell, that would just vaporize people. But you just have to be lucky enough to roll the right things. So I think that Primal Magic has a great place to really be a skill ceiling for people who are very, very good at the game or just lucky. But it's also just it's not as easy to use or familiar as using Elementalism or Demonology.
Yeah, that's for sure. Cool. All right, so we made it to our end of our list. We're trying to keep these videos not too long, but really wanted to focus on, now that we've seen a bunch of games in the local community, to seeing what are the big changes or big updates or impacts we've seen to each roster. This is our take on the Beastmen. Please do let us know in the comments. Hey, did we miss something? Some of the big impact you've been seeing in your local community or for your list that you've been building? Perhaps maybe we haven't seen. We'd love to hear about it. Evan, any last closing words, sir?
I just want to mention that, if you guys really like our content, you can always like the video. And if you want to join in on more discussions, we talk about this stuff all the time on our Discord. And our Discord has a link in the video description. So it's always in there. People who want to come down there, it's free to join. You can just come on and talk to us.
All right. I guess with that, we'll wrap it up. We'll see y'all next time.